Come a little closer and lend me your ears. Don't worry, you keep yours while I keep mine.
In each episode, we'll dig into the major stories, uncover the truth, and retrieve gems from Yada's blog.
We'll discuss what's right, bark about what's wrong, wag our tails at the thrill of discovery, and take you on adventures through the exciting world we live in today.
So, fasten your curiosity leash and get ready.
Right then, coming to you with another episode of the Yada's Vlog on a Blog. Tomorrow's news, disseminated today. Let's dive in.
Okay. Wookie had the opportunity to see himself introducing the show. And I know this is not the vlog on the vlog. We're actually continuing with our series on the last word picture. But the new Wookie introduction is so fun that we did want to play it. And Wookie was up here right on the desk, ready to co-host, saw himself delivering that intro, and wanted to get up close and personal with that handsome dog, particularly the one in on the blue suit. So it is with a big smile that we bring you the Yahowah vlog. This is Wookie. I am Yada. We are the hosts of your show. In the last statement, we're dealing with the 116th Mizmowr. It is a delightful story, so that you have an idea as to what it all represents. Okay, you can sit back down now there, Wookie. That's okay. That's okay, but just sit right down. Right down. There you go. Good boy. Okay, good boy. So that you know what it represents. Dowd, who I admire probably more than anyone in the last 2,000 years, certainly. I recognize that he had the weight of the world on his shoulders. It's the toughest job in the world to speak for Yahowah, to represent him, and to do so in the presence of his people, who have a tendency to be very difficult to be around, as we learned from the Exodus, where Moshe got so fed up with them that just 3 days out of Choreb, he said, God, you might as well just kill me. No one can do this job. If you have any respect for me at all, you'll not have me continue to do this. This job cannot be done. And Dowd managed to hang in there longer even than Moshe did. Moshe was 3 days out of Choreb, although he did finish the job over 40 years. To some extent, he mailed some of it in. And he just got them to the promised land and not into it. As it relates to Dowd, he had really 48 pretty good years. He started at 8 years old, and it was 56 before he had his complete crash and burn. And what we read after his fiasco with Bathsheba and the elimination of the light of Yah, which is the man that he had killed, her husband, Uriah, that Dowd became angry that God was judgmental of him, that God disassociated from Dowd. To a large extent, they were not on speaking terms. And rather than accept that he had been wrong and learn from it, we all make mistakes. We all are wrong at times. We all stumble and fall. And rather than Dowd getting back up and recognizing that he could learn from this experience and grow from it, Dowd didn't. He lashed out at God. And we had to go through the horrible response that Dowd had toward Yahowah in the immediate aftermath of his blunder, which is recorded in the 51st Mashal, not Mashal, but of Mizmowr or Psalm. And it's horrendous. And we dealt with it. We didn't want to, but nonetheless, it's an important story to tell. And it is Dowd's failings in this regard that really set up both Judaism and Christianity. Had he not done so, it would have been impossible for anyone to steal Dowd's title as the Messiah and Son of God, as our Savior, as the returning King, and to give it to Well, in Christianity, it was stolen and given to the mythical Jesus. And in Judaism, it was stolen and given to the warlord Bar Kokhba. And that would never have happened, could not have happened, had Dowd not fallen so precipitously and then wallowed in his own shame. And what we learned is that a number of things. First of all, it was assumed but not stated that Dowd could not have served as the Passover lamb, even though they don't have their Jesus fulfilling Passover, because he was not perfect, particularly because of the horrible failures associated with the Bathsheba affair. But one of the things that we have learned, and it's exceedingly important if you're going to have a relationship with God, is that he's not looking for perfect. He knows that there's no such thing as perfect. There's never been a perfect animal. Even his actions over the past have been imperfect at times. And that the reason God does not want and is not looking for perfect is, first, it's impossible. And second, it is undesirable. If we were perfect, we would be indistinguishable. We would be boring. We'd have no character. We'd have no ability to learn. We'd have nothing that we could offer. We'd have no way of proving our worth. We could not grow. And so it would be it'd be actually counterproductive to be perfect. God's not looking for that. He is looking for, are you observant? In other words, do you closely examine and carefully consider what he has to say and what appears all around us, so that ultimately you would be a good travel companion going through the universe with God. Second of all, are you responsive? Are you willing to engage? Are you willing to make a relationship where you're not dependent, you're not someone who is expecting entitlements? You don't expect God to do everything and you have to do nothing, like the nature of Christianity. Or in the case of Judaism, it's just the opposite. People do everything and God does nothing. But in these opposites, you're not either of those two. You're willing to listen to God, and pay attention to what he has to say, and then respond, contributing to the relationship, making everything better by your response. And number 4 is the most interesting of all. God wants us to demonstrate that we are reliable, that we can be trusted. He wants to remove us from these physical bodies, from the restraints of these bodies, so that we can go off and explore the universe with him, so that we can enter the seventh dimension and be with him, so that the gap between who we are and who he is narrowed with us being raised up to his level. And he can't do that. He shouldn't do that until such time as we demonstrate that we can be trusted with all of that increased power and knowledge and capability. And so with Dowd, God came up with a very interesting way of resolving this dispute between the two of them, where Dowd had, not just fallen and made a mess of things, but had lashed out at God, blaming God for this situation. Dowd became Yisra'el. Became the same Yisra'el that we witnessed during the Exodus, the same Yisra'el that we witness today. He became Yisra'el, belligerent and antagonistic towards God. And what Dowd demonstrates by the way that God resolved this problem is that it can be resolved. So there is hope for Yehudim and for Yisra'el now, because God resolved this problem with Dowd. And he did so in a most fascinating way. It's something that, again, we have just begun to explore, because it is so, it's the last thing you would actually expect, I suppose, even though it's been there all the time. When you go back in time and you realize that Enoch, who was the first person, his name is actually Chanuk. It means that he is prepared, and that then he is deployed by God. That's what his name means. That he uniquely appealed to Yahowah. found Yahowah, engaged in a relationship, demonstrated that he could meet those three criterion that God was looking for: pay attention, respond, and be reliable. And God took him for that purpose so that he could redeploy him. And redeploy him he has. And by starting with someone that existed very early on, 5,400 years ago, God was able to reinsert him, just taking his Nephesh soul and Nasama conscience and reasserting that in a temporary Bashar body, using DNA to reconstruct a body and putting him in. And so long as God started with him early on, 5,400 years ago, it's pretty early on, and then inserted him when need be to keep his people and plan on track, then God could do so without interfering with free will and without making such a scene that he becomes undeniable. It's the best of all worlds. And God did that very thing with his beloved son, Dowd. He walked away, as he must, when Dowd became so contentious and belligerent. And rather than giving up on him, which he could not do, and without ending the entire human experience, there would have been no purpose in creating mankind, for creating this planet conducive to life, for the entire human experience, for even sharing the Torah and creating the Moed and the covenant, the Beryth. It's all for naught if God couldn't reestablish his relationship with Dowd, and yet he wasn't talking to him, just as he's not talking to Israel. So something had to happen. God had to intervene in a way that he could communicate with Dowd, get his attention, get the relationship restored, and then ultimately Dowd's reputation restored through someone, since he wasn't going to do it himself. And the same thing is true now with Yisra'el. God's not talking directly to Yisra'el, hasn't talked directly to Israel since he divorced himself and made that pronouncement in the book of Hosea 2,700 years ago. So God's plan is that same soul that was originally introduced to us as Chanuk, was reinserted here as the person known as Obed-Edom. Helped Dowd get the Ark of the Covenant properly positioned within on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. And then as Dowd cascaded into his self-imposed exile from God, it was this man now under the name Ethan Ha-Ezraki. And we will, in due time, explain exactly who that individual is, because God has a great deal to tell us about him, actually, and the role he played. But he and his wife, the Yahowah's Amma, intervened on behalf of Yahowah to bring his wayward son back to him. And the result of that is now emblazoned in this, the 116th Mizmowr, our psalm. So the next statement, this was the last one that we shared at the end of our concluding program on this. I think it was 2 days ago now. And it reads, Yahowah. Now, that in itself is significant, because in the 51st, guess whose name is missing?
Yahweh's.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Dowd wouldn't even say it. And here now that he's been subject to this intervention, Yahowah. Yahowah observes, watching over, Shamar. Now, this is known because, well, the intervention with Dowd came in two phases. One is that Yahowah's Amma, his productive mother, not Yahowah's productive mother, but the person known as Yahowah's Amma, which means productive mother, was deployed first. She met with Dowd and sobered him up, told him to get off the booze, told him to start thinking with the big head, not the little head. She spoke to him as a mother would speak to a son. And she at least got his attention. And then God sent in the bull. He sent in a highly judgmental individual who came armed with the proper testimony. He came armed with the ultimate hammer, the 89th Mizmowr. It was specifically revealed in a collaborative effort between Yahowah and Ethan High as Rocky for the express purpose of reestablishing the relationship between Dowd and Yahowah, and then reestablishing Dowd's reputation with the world today. And in it, one of the statements that is made is that Yahowah shamar Dowd, that Yahowah keeps a watchful eye on Dowd, that he never lets Dowd out of his sight, that he is focused upon his beloved son. And so Dowd is reaffirming that he knows that to be true now. Yahowah observes, watching over, keeps focused upon shamar. And he's saying now the open-minded and the receptive. Yeah, because guess what happened to Dowd? Dowd's mind was opened and he became receptive to Yahowah again, became amenable, approachable, is what pathe means. So Yahowah is observant and pays attention to, is focused upon the open-minded and the receptive. Now, the beauty of this statement is it's not entirely self-centered. No, it's true that Dowd could be self-centered and not be self-centered, because in fact it is Dowd returning to Yahowah that enables the fulfillment of Pesach Matzah and Makurim, that opens the doorway to life, takes our guilt, deposited in the Sheol, so that we are now guiltless before God, and then opens the door to the family home of Yahowah through Makurim. So Dowd returning in this way is selfless. It's the most selfless act in human history. And it is for the benefit of those who are open-minded and receptive to what he has done, to this very report that we are providing to you today. But it's also of him, because he became approachable again, amenable again, one who could be persuaded as to who he was and what role he was going to play in God's ultimate story. And then he goes personally here, says, I was barely hanging on by a thread, and I was in need. I was fading away, and therefore concerned for me. He, Yahowah, or he, Ethan Ha, is Rocky. He saved me. He liberated and spared me, helping me, rescuing me from harm's way. Now, I've said this a lot of times, and that's, by the way, that's Psalm 116:6, is that in Hebrew, there is no distinction between an uppercase letter and a lowercase letter. It's only one case. And therefore, we do not know if the intent when Dowd was speaking here was to say he as in Yahowah, or he as in the one that Yahowah sent to resolve this relationship, to deliver the 89th Mizmowr. And from Yahowah's perspective, and I think from Dowd's perspective, didn't matter. Didn't matter if you saw this as a lowercase he, as the person who delivered the message to Dowd that saved him, that liberated and spared him, that helped him, that rescued him from harm's way, from Yasha, as Yasha, as his deliverer. Or if you see it as God speaking through this man, and therefore he is crediting Yahowah, because what difference does it really make? I mean, Yahowah made a commitment that he was going to work through people and speak through them And Dowd was one of the people that he would work through and speak through. But at this moment, Dowd wasn't listening to him. So he had to have another person that he could speak through and work through to get Dowd's attention and to save him from himself. No, God's the operative actor that makes this possible. But he's also working through a tangible, very real person. So I think that it doesn't really matter if it's the lowercase he is in Yahowah, or he is in this man that delivered the message of the 89th Mizmowr. And by the way, wrote a considerable amount of it. And I've spent now 5 days tracking down why Ethan Ha is Rocky. Delve into a combination of statements very early on in this by telling us that there would be a man from the sea, a man from the west, who would be elevated by Yahowah and deployed as surging waves, even as stones within those waves, to agitate the religious of Israel and then to caress the land itself, relentless in his pursuit of Yisra'el, who would ultimately be the one who brings down the most nefarious of all people. He is called Rahab, and he is brought down by the final Yisra'el who was empowered for this purpose. And we're going to learn that Rahab is the corporeal manifestation of a certain individual of political prowess who we are told, even with all the promises he has made to Israel, is exactly as I have positioned him, the great betrayer. When Israel needs support, he will betray Israel. And the man who ultimately brings that great betrayer to his knees is the final Yisra'el. He is the author of the 89th Mizmowr, the 89th Psalm. He's inspired by Yahowah, the conveyor of many of Yahowah's statements, but he presents himself in that role because it's important that Dowd understand that the man speaking to him that resolves this conflict between he and Yahowah, he has skin in the game. That he's the other man that will offer his Bashar body to be pummeled by the beast. And that he does so to make it possible for Dowd to return. And that as someone who is nearly as vital to God's ongoing story as is Dowd himself, he has earned the right to talk very sternly, but also exceedingly confidently and credibly to the king, to restore his reputation with Yahowah, and then to restore his reputation with his people. And so that is how this extraordinary event is being resolved. So while the open-minded and the receptive, comprise even today our target audience, when it comes to the testimony of God, they remain as rare as they were in Dowd's day. And with Dowd's day, there was one. And yet, apart from denouncing religion, politics, and conspiracy, collectivism, anti-Semitism, and militancy, there is very little that we can do to alter this equation to God's favor. All of those who prefer religion, politics, conspiracy, collectivism, anti-Semitism, and militancy are automatically set apart from those who can process this message. They are the unreceptive when it comes to God's favor. So we can learn the truth, we can share it, knowing that we and it will remain unpopular and to the point of being publicly crucified for conveying it. That's important for you to know. But the old adage, and I think this is kind of fun, that I'm hanging by a thread, well, it was coined by Dowd. And in this case, it was true. If not for the intervention that transpired to create this song out of the 89th song, revealing these results, he would not have been liberated from the worth aspects of his nature. He would have remained as Israel is today, and all hope for Israel's recovery would have been lost. And while it is becoming undeniably obvious from the written record that Yahowah has provided that the Amma and her Baal were inserted into this timeline to rectify the gravest of all concerns, these people would not have existed, and they would have made no difference had Yahowah not conceived them, prepared them, and then deployed them as needed. But God did. We did. He did. And the result is this pronouncement: my Nephesh soul, my Nephesh soul has decided to return and has been restored to your home and restful abode to recuperate. Indeed, it is true, Yahowah has weaned and raised you, providing recompense through you. So here we go. Dowd now understands you need to rise above the physicality of a body and all of the desires of a body and concerns over a body, and recognize that your calling is all enmeshed in your Nephesh soul. That it's your Nephesh soul that would be reinserted, Dowd, to serve as the Passover lamb. Not your soul is going to die as the Passover lamb. It's the physical body that soul occupies that will be sacrificed as the lamb to open the door to life. That it is your Nephesh soul that will carry humankind's, at least the covenant's, guilt into Sheol, to deposit it there, never to be seen again. It's your Nephesh soul that will be released from Sheol, encapsulated in the Ruach, and brought back to your Father in Shamayim. That's where you are going to return. That is why once you are restored, that you can make this decision. You can recover and resolve the problem of all Yisra'el and the covenant family as a result of this. And you can go and we can follow to your restful home to recuperate. Yes, indeed. That's powerful. That's life transforming. So it is true that Yahowah has weaned and raised you. Now, what do you think Dowd's talking about here? Would he say me if he was speaking of me? Providing recompense through you? Who is? It's Oth here. Who's Dowd speaking of? Now, you have a couple of options. And I think that the most intriguing of those options, and the most likely of those options, is exceedingly powerful. It is, again, life-altering, planet-altering. Because Oth, Gamel al-Oth, that Yahowah has weaned and raised you, providing recompense through you, has expended considerable time and energy to rear you. You is feminine singular. I think the answer is really quite simple. What did he talk about in the previous sentence? His Nephesh soul. Nephesh soul is what? Feminine. Doesn't make Dowd girly, but it means that God is saving the world through Dowd's Nephesh. And so when he says that begins to speak of you, feminine, singular, He's saying through this one soul, his soul, God's going to save the world. That's how he's providing recompense through Pesach and Matzah, leading to Bikurim. Now, that being the case, that is extraordinary. So Dowd Shub, he returned to Yahowah, as must every Yehud who wants to survive the next 7 years during the time of Israel's troubles. This realization would later be articulated and explained through the prophet Hosea. For Yahowah to Shub, to return to Yisra'el, Yisra'el must first Shub, return to Yahowah. He's emphatic in this regard. And God doesn't change his mind. He doesn't renege on something he has said and promised. So this is the prime directive. It's the ultimate lesson. It is as true for king as it is for the pauper, as true for the man who united Yisra'el as it is for the Yisra'el that is so disunited today. As a result, Dowd's Nephesh soul would never die. She, souls are feminine in Hebrew, would spend all but 4 of the next 3 millennia at home with Yahowah. And since the king realizes that the profound importance of this perspective on his soul and what his soul is going to accomplish, he steps out of first person to address the future of the world as a result of what his soul will accomplish doing so in third person. He knows that Yahowah raised his Nephesh for this purpose and that he will deploy his Nephesh soul to provide recompense and redeem those who are open and receptive to the covenant, as well as to this man who brought this message, the 89th Mizmowr, to the very Son of God, our Savior, saving the Savior. So these, my friends, are just words on the page, but they open heaven's door. Dowd's soul is central to our survival. It would be, and now has been, his Nephesh, who was dispatched and given a Bashar body to fulfill Pesach, and then without it, carried our guilt into Sheol, enveloped in Yahowah's Ruach. Dowd's Nephesh, protected by Yahowah's Spirit, was released then from Sheol, hell, on Bikurim, returning to Shamayim as God's Bakor, firstborn son. Yisra'el. Why can't you process that? I know the rabbis can't. I'm not expecting them. In fact, I don't want them to. But those of you who are not stained and stigmatized, stunted by rabbinical deceptions, why can't you process that? Shalah. After projecting all manner of inappropriate mandates and moods on Yahowah and his 51st Psalm, Dowd is now celebrating the voice of the cohortative, now conveying a first-person expression of volition. He is speaking of his own decision, revealing his choice to return and to restore his relationship with Yahowah, knowing that this will be the result. Of particular interest, in fact, monumental importance, the king has evolved past the fixation on bodies, which was his problem previously, both living ones and feminine ones and dead ones and masculine ones. He has matured to value his and other Nephesh souls. Of course, beginning with his own, because without his own, there is no hope for the Nephesh of others. Now, this is the lesson we all ought to learn. It's the lesson that destroys both Christianity and Judaism, as well as Islam. In Christianity, the solution is a resurrected body. In Islam, it's all about resurrected bodies that are either tortured or satiated with carnal desires. And in Judaism, they also believe in the resurrected bodies of the dead. Dowd now realizes that's not the case. He's had this man whose soul has been put into a physical body and delivered from heaven, because he has been in Shamaim for a considerable time at this point, some 1,400 years, and brought to Dowd for this purpose. In fact, I think it would be 2,400 years at this point, brought to Dowd for this purpose, saying, pal, it's not this, it's what's inside of you. It's what animates it. Your very essence of your life is your Nephesh. Start focusing on it because of what God can do and will do with it. And he would know. He's a Nephesh. Put in, pulled out, put back in to the ordinary flow of time and the world of the limits of 3D. And, in those limits, he would be, oh, God, I'm going to know those physical bodies. Can you hurry this up? I want to be released of all of that again. Because there's such an enormous difference between the liberty of 7 dimensions and our soul being enveloped in energy and light versus being constrained here in 3D with the physical limits of a decaying body. This is vital to our survival. And it is such a departure from Dowd's deplorable attitude in Mizmowr 51. I'm of the conclusion that our intervention as surrogate parents could not have occurred over the course of a day, but instead a considerable period of time. The evidence is mounting that we were deployed for at least 8 years, and I think that's a much longer time than that. I think it goes all the way back to we arrived as a couple during the experience with Obed-Edom and getting the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem, properly positioned as a lesson for Dowd of what will also happen in the future as the man from Edom will accomplish the same thing prior to Dowd's return. So I think it goes all the way back to that point that he was able to witness Dowd's gradual and then precipitous decline and be prepared to intervene at the right moment. So I think that at the very, very least, he is now confronting Dowd during the last 4 years of Dowd's first life. And the initial 4, I think he would continue of Solomon's reign. Solomon was only 12 years old when he took the throne. And so he needed some surrogate parenting for sure. His mother was not helpful in this regard. So all guiding him. In the case of Solomon, he would have been there from 12 to 16 years of age in Solomon's presence prior to that time as someone who was, he would have known tangentially by the repositioning of the Ark of the Covenant. And he obviously knew all about him because he would write of him as the Nachri. And when he gave his Sermon on the Mount, that incredibly important speech in 2nd Chronicles 6. So I think that Solomon was guided by him from 12 to 16 years of age and up to the point of beginning the construction of the home for Yahweh's name. Now, should this be the case, then Ethan, the perpetually reoccurring and steadfast, the constantly deployed and eternally engaged, the long established and perennially unrelenting, who is productive and everlasting as Rocky, the ones springing up as a tree, coming forth prepared and shining at the time with logical expressions regarding the sequence of events. That's what Ethan is Rocky means. Delivering, therefore, the 89th Mizmowr as it was conveyed, well, that was conveyed through Yahweh's Nekar. Now, this would also explain why the Mashal were written during this interval by a father and mother, a husband and wife, and to their son on behalf of their God. Yes, we will learn who actually wrote them. So as a result, it reads this, yes, it's true. You have at this moment in time undressed and removed. You have withdrawn, you have rescued, you have gone through the process of unclothing, if you will, exposing my Nephesh from dying, from the plague of death, my eyes from tears, and thus my feet from stumbling. Mizmowr song, Psalm 116:8. Oh, so powerful, so accurate. In the last word picture, Mashal 31, the constant emphasis is on undressing Dowd so that he could actually see who he is, to expose him to himself. And then readorning him with the ultimate seamstress, the fashion coordinator for forevermore, the Amma, who is called the greatest of women and who is known as Ashar. So he was undressed. His clothes were removed. The facade was gone, leaving the soul of Dowd exposed. But therefore, we kept him from dying. His eyes were flooded with tears. There was nothing but sadness, but we removed those too. And therefore, this was the means to keep the king from stumbling. Remember what we've said? What God is looking for is that we, when we stumble, can get back up. That we, when we confront obstacles, clear them out of the way. When we're wrong, we learn from it. When we cry, we learn to smile. Rather than die, we live. That's the message. And sometimes the only way you can get there is to be completely exposed so that you see what's really important. You know, I was viciously attacked, as was my wife. When we noted that in God bringing us back to the conditions of Eden, that's the purpose of Sukkah, that it's a return to Eden. Now, that's profound by itself, to recognize that 6,000 years ago, we were escorted out of Eden so that we would have an opportunity to demonstrate that we could meet the three criterion that God had established for us. And that recognizing that we were being brought back to Eden, I brought up, well, what was the dress code in Eden? Nothing but a smile, right? Now, does that mean that everybody going forward for the next 1,000 years is going to be naked? Probably not. I think that most will be adorned in the attire designed by my lovely wife, who is a fashion designer. But that's not what God meant when he said that Adam and Yahowah were naked and they were not ashamed. It means that prior to this whole event and the unraveling of it, that we can be exposed to God without shame. And this is what Dowd demonstrates when Obed-Edom resolves the problem of getting the ark properly positioned within on the Temple Mount under the tent of the restoring witness in Jerusalem. That Dowd realized, I don't have to have that responsibility. It's been taken from me and is being carried out by this man, Obed-Edom. And therefore, I can celebrate that result. And what he did is he put on the ephod, the attire up here over his heart of the high priest, knowing that his function when he returned as king 3,000 years later would be to anoint that mercy seat on Kippurim, which was the day he was going to return, as is required in the Torah teaching, for his restoration via the bull's blood, and for the restoration of Yisra'el by the goats, Elia and Yadis. And that he knew that at that time. And he was coming to embrace why that bull, therefore, the Adam of Parah, was the symbol Yahweh was using to bring the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem, and to celebrate the fact that the result of all of this is that we would be allowed back into the earth, restored to the conditions of Eden, where the dress code was a smile. He performed, he danced, celebrated, he was joyous. Eden means great joy. Naked from the ephod down. And when I shared that, and what we had is there's a bunch of just malcontent, disgusting women that like to tear me and my wife down, who know better, but their lives are miserable, and they, like all miserable, psychotic people, get their jollies by tearing others down to their level. But they messed with the wrong person from Yahweh's perspective. And so this is the picture that Dowd now has. He now is putting this all together. And he knows that he can dance without stumbling, that he can deal with the reality of his people and the predicament that he has created without tears in his eyes, and that his soul will live to perform all of these wonderful things, including the recompense needed to open the door to life and to resolve his guilt and the guilt of every member, so that we can be part of Yahweh's eternal family. This is what he was celebrating. Yahweh was true to his word. King Dowd, the chosen son of God and the Messiah, has never and will never die. And while his Nephesh soul would inhabit a mortal bashar body on 3 occasions, the soul placed within those bodies was pronounced and made immortal. This realization destroys the very foundation of Christianity. It undermines Judaism. It is a reminder that if you are among those who the Spirit of Yahweh is bequeathed upon, and you remain true to that calling, then your soul is forever perceived as being encapsulated in Yahweh's light and energy. It will never die. It is the key to validating my discovery, proving that Dowd's soul was deployed in his second of 3 lives to fulfill Passover and unyeasted bread in 33 CE. And that means that Jesus is nothing but a God-forsaken myth, a horrible, monstrous, fake God. And that Dowd, he's our Savior. Now, speaking of vital discoveries, Dowd has affirmed another. It was only a few months ago that I came to realize that the ultimate test for mankind that was played out in the garden and that Adam failed to meet as Yahowah requested. And that was that we have to do the three things that God needs to witness in us for him to surround our souls in light, for him to enable us to soar beyond the stars. And that is that we must demonstrate ourselves worthy. We do so by one, closely examining and carefully considering the testimony he has provided. Two, by engaging, responding accordingly, so that we make a contribution to the relationship and to the world around us. And three, that we demonstrate that we are reliable and that we can be trusted by correcting our mistakes and learning from them and getting back up so that we can keep going when we stumble and fall. In this regard, the verb shalats was constrained in time through the perfect conjugation. This means that Dowd was undressed and exposed so that his failures of his past could be addressed and removed. He was saying that he would never cry or stumble again. That's not what he was conveying. He was saying that this persistent crisis that he was in right now, where he was constantly stumbling over himself and precluding his vision by having his eyes constantly welling up in tears, which was his current situation, that had been resolved because it was written in the perfect. That was now solved. And to some degree, the idea of being shalats, undressed, brings us right back to the last mashal, where the Amma was not only dressing down her son, but also adorning him for success going forward. It's one of the major themes, if not the major theme, of the last word picture. To serve mankind on behalf of God, we must be guided by one without being influenced by the other. It's true. This is the message of the Hitpael stem. If we are going to speak on behalf of God and serve mankind, then we have to be influenced by God and not influenced by man. That's rare. And that's the message that is conveyed, as I've said, by the Hitpael stem. It reveals that Dowd was now set apart unto Yahowah, making him apolitical and anti-religious. And for this position, he was prepared to carry out his next two lives. The text reads, I will walk independently, progressing through life, unaffected by any societal influence. I will journey traveling and going about life free of any outside pressure. Hitpael, imperfect, first person, singular, alongside the presence of Yahowah in the land and on earth of those living more than one life. Ha-Chaim. Song 116:9. Now, when I tell people that Dowd fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bekurim in 33 CE, there are those who claim that that's impossible because they think he died 1,000 years earlier, even though God said he's never going to die. And yet Yahowah was emphatic, confirming that this would never befall his son. Moreover, God is even more emphatic when affirming that Dowd will return as king forevermore. So since his Nephesh soul is alive, And since he is returning, why is it so difficult for people to accept that his soul will be placed in 3 physical bodies over that span of time rather than just 2? And multiple lives cannot be the issue because, well, they accept that Elijah, lived 2,880 years ago, but is returning as one of the 2 witnesses. They know that Enoch, walked with God and then was taken by him. For what purpose? It's not only obvious, but it's irrefutable that Dowd wrote in first person how he himself would be crucified 600 years before the torment was invented and 1,000 years before he endured it. If you don't think that's prophetic confirmation, then what is? Well, how about this? In 555 BCE, Dowd was sent to Daniel to reveal the exact day that he, as the Messiah, would fulfill Chag Matzah in 33 CE and provided that prophecy for us. And we have copies of Daniel going back 300 years prior to the fulfillment, absolutely, unequivocally proving that this is true. I suppose even more to the point, Dowd is the Etz Chaim. He is the tree of lives in the garden. And he is the one who opened the door to life by fulfilling Passover. Can you make the connection? As such, when he returns as our king, he will also be our savior. This is precisely what the Amma and her Baal sought to reestablish through their intervention and counsel at this time. So in this next pronouncement, we find Dowd becoming what he was railing against in the 51st Psalm. Trustworthy and reliable. He said that was impossible, but now he knows it's possible. This is what Yahweh needed to see in his beloved son before deploying him in year 4000 Yah in advance of fulfilling the spring Mikre. Now, previous to this, we have seen how Dowd had afflicted himself, becoming depressed. In our counsel, he became responsive again. As a result, Yahweh knew that he could trust Dowd, his son, sufficiently to enable the promises of the Moedim, during which he was afflicted, so that we would not be burdened in this manner. At this time, the king came to epitomize the full expression of being responsive to God. His life, therefore, becomes an exemplar, a lesson for all of us. I'll conclude this program here with Mizmowr, Psalm 116:10. I became trustworthy and reliable. Aman. I regained credibility and integrity, establishing myself as dependable and enduring, trustworthy and loyal. Hiphil, perfect, first person, singular. As a result of communicating, ki dubar, when I said, I was terribly afflicted and I was depressed, and now I'm wholly responsive. After having been anxious, this was ma'od, After having been anxious and miserable, dejected and humiliated, I answered the call. So I'm replying. Call perfect, first person, singular. Mizmowr song, Psalm 116:10. Now again, I would say mission accomplished. Put up the banner. The relationship and trust needed have now been restored. Dowd went from blaming God for his mistakes to accepting responsibility and to acknowledging that he had returned to accountability. This is all God ever wanted. This is what he needs from all of us. Yes, the point would have been made had I chosen one or two renderings of Shaphat's rather than 18. And I did. I chose 18 words to define it. But since they all seem to apply, I thought it was appropriate to cast a wide net, and I will share that with you because it is profound. You're going to see the maximum expression as we delve into this in our next program of amplification, because of where Dowd had been and where he now was as a result of this intervention, which came first through Yahowah's Amma, and then through the power of the 89th Mizmowr. Well, I thank you for listening. This is something that I'm deeply vested into, that I care enormously about. I feel like I am speaking to you as one who is indeed 5,600 years old, 5,400 years old, I think is the more correct accounting, and as one who has played a significant role. And not only making these words part of Dowd's expression and his return to Yahowah, but also returning Dowd's credibility, his reputation to his people at this time. So, indeed, I thank you for listening. Good day.
Hey there, thanks for tuning in. That was Fetch. Gotta run now. Catch y'all on our next podcast.